All right, this is Matt with Patriots Corner. We have a special guest who I've been trying. There's been complication a little bit. Darin is a former United States Coast Guard special operator. We recently got in contact. I'm excited that I have him on the line right now, and he's going, we're going to do an interview on his past. It's going to be very exciting. And Darin, what's going on?
Matt, thank you so much. I'm excited to be doing this with you. I know we kind of played a little tag, for lack of a better word, trying to coordinate both of our schedules because we're both pretty busy. But I'm excited. I'm really happy what you're doing out there, and I'm just excited to get this thing started today.
Well, Darin, thank you so much. And, I want to say thank you for your service. And another fact, the working man never rests. That's something that I've had to, come to realize as well. Yeah, we were playing tag, but, it's just due to busyness. The working man truly never rests, I guess.
That's so true. So true.
So, Darin, when I first spoke to you on the phone, when I first got in contact with the referral, Tom, he mentioned to me about your past a little bit and your job title, and I gotta be honest, I had no idea that the Coast Guard had a special operations unit.
Yeah, I that doesn't surprise me at all. That doesn't surprise me at all. Actually, most people that I even talk to, when they meet me and they start talking to me, they think I was in another, basically, either the Navy or the Army, and then I tell them I was in the Coast Guard and start talking about, because they hear me telling a story or something or some team talk, and it confuses people. And then I think what they do is they go home and get on Google, and then they start searching stuff, and they're like, scratch their head and go, "Oh wow, I had no idea."
And I always kind of figured too that there was definitely something, because doesn't the Coast Guard have a hostage rescue unit in case there was a hostage situation where they had to board a vessel, wherever they were?
Yeah. So what it is that when I was in, it was all under the DOG program, which is Deployable Operations Group, and then it changed to DSF, which is Deployable Specialized Forces. So there's in those units, which I was in the TACLET. I was on Team 401, which is a leadet, which is in the TACLET. I was TACLET South out of Miami. But you've got a port security unit, you've got a MSST team, which is the Maritime Safety and Security teams. Then you've got the security response team. Then you got the National Strike Force. So there's quite a few teams under the umbrella.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's something how you were saying how people will go back and look on Google and kind of check it out and scratch their head because they keep it secretive. But there's got to be a reason why they keep it secretive, because what you're doing is some of the best training in the world.
Yeah, it really is. And it's interesting because we've worked with, you do a lot of joint operations. You work with a lot of Navy guys. You work with a lot of highly trained operators. And, a funny little fact and this is after I got out, but there's actually a couple Coast Guard guys, and you can quote me, but maybe not 100%. But I think it was around 2010, two Coast Guard guys actually went through the SEAL training and went through, like a year and a half of training, and they graduated, with the SEAL team. I think it was class 277 or 276. Not 100% sure on that. But, you can imagine that all these guys in their Navy uniforms, they finally got their tridents, and all of a sudden there's two Coasties standing next to them, which probably blew people's minds that were in the crowd. They're like, what are those uniforms, So I think there's a lot of things that people just don't know about that happens in military, especially when you start talking about special operational groups or, deployable special forces, regardless if it's the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Army, the Air Force. There's units in each one of these branches that do some pretty high speed stuff, and it's fun stuff. And you have a bond with these guys forever.
Yeah, and it's something that you bring that up about the two guys who were originally in the Coast Guard who did go through the BUDS training. I looked that up. Yeah, I remember seeing that. I remember watching a video, and I'm pretty sure that they did put them through a sense of like a preparatory. And they were well prepared, and they did graduate. That's very cool. That's, very, very cool. And that's the coolest thing, is that it's all secretive because, you guys are the best trained guys in the world. And, I'm a firm believer in that. I do want to take a step back and ask you the question that I love to ask. Where did all this fire and drive come from? What were you like as a child?
Well, I I think as a child, I grew up in a family. I had one brother, mother and dad, very hard blue collar workers, and I think I was just, I don't want to say a wild child because I was very well disciplined. Dinner was at 5:30 every single night. Don't be late. When you wake up to go to school, it wasn't, oh, I'm going back to sleep for another 30 minutes. When my mom or dad came in the room and woke me up, it was time to get up, got dressed, ate our breakfast, went to school. We weren't late. But I was always into more action, more high speed stuff. I was the first guy jumping off the back of the boat or jumping off of a bridge to see, I could go higher than the next guy or, swing from a tree or, just fun stuff like that as a kid. So I think my brother and my brother wasn't in the military, but I think we were both, we're outdoor kids and, we just love to have fun and just, we like the action.
Of course, who doesn't? That's the unanswered question. When it comes to some people who are like so hesitant to do something, and you describing your parents. Did you have a tough dad growing up?
Yeah, he was. We were very disciplined, but I look back at it, and probably as a kid growing up, I used to get mad. I was like, "Why do I have to be home at 5:30 for dinner when my friends don't have to?" But looking back at it, I wouldn't trade it for the world. My brother and I, we both played sports competitively all the way up and through college, and that was because of discipline that my parents had in us. We were both very good at hockey, and hockey's a very competitive sport. It's very physical, and when there would be action in the corner instead of going away from it, both my brother and I would be the first guys, to mix it up. So, and that comes from my family background. My dad was a construction worker and my mom was also, she worked in a factory. They just instilled just, good, proper behavior with us. And I look back at it now and I wouldn't change it for the world.
And that's where I made my first connection with you. I don't know if I told you when I spoke to you previously. I was a hockey player as well, doing the same stuff. I remember when I started playing hockey, aggression was the only thing that attracted me to it. I couldn't score goals. I had a few, could not score goals. So my dad said to me, if we're going to pay this money, well, then you better be good at something. So if you're going to be good at hitting people and fighting, well then hell, there's your forte.
There's your forte, right?
That's too funny. So growing up, was your family very pro-military? Did you come from a patriotic family? You said hardworking American, mom and dad. Was your family very patriotic?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Like we talked about earlier. My last name is Bibeau, which is a French Canadian name. So a lot of my family lives in Canada, but I can tell you that every one of them loves the American flag. We grew up around everything being patriotic. Fourth of July is an amazing holiday for us. My family, my mom and dad both have quite a few brothers and sisters. Good old Catholic family. My grandfather was in World War II. I got an uncle that was in the Korean War. Another uncle that's a Vietnam vet. Another uncle that was in the Army. My uncle Claude was in the Army for 8 years. A couple cousins in the military. My uncle Roger was in the Navy, and then my dad was in the 82nd Airborne.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like we wore uniforms running around our house as kids, but it was definitely in our blood.
And that's got to explain some of the discipline, I would think, as well. I had no idea that your father was former military as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad's 70, just turned 77 this year, and he's still in contact with some of his, I think two of his guys that were in his unit, 30, 40, 50 years ago, however long ago. So it's a while ago.
That's amazing. That's amazing. My grandfather's the same thing. It almost makes it a little emotional too, because it really goes to show that the brotherhood that you guys are a part of truly never dies.
That's true. Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Now, when did you first take the step to now join the military? When did the craziness become, okay, I found the job that I want to do. And then why did you pick Coast Guard?
Well, actually, it's kind of a little different for me. I was actually playing hockey in northern New York, up in the Adirondacks, and met a guy when I was playing hockey, and he was a commercial fisherman from Alaska. His family was. So I ended up going out to Alaska and spending about 6 months or 5, 6 months with him fishing. And while I was out there, I liked the adventure. I liked the action. I thought it was going to be great. And, I was out in the Shelikof Straits, off of Kodiak Island. And all of a sudden I hear about the Coast Guard. And I was like, I don't even know anything about the Coast Guard. So next thing you know, I start learning about the Coast Guard. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I didn't even really know the actual extent of what the Coast Guard did or didn't do. So then I started thinking, I was like, oh, should I go in the Navy? And I remember talking to my dad about it. I go, I think I want to go in the military. He's like, well, there's a lot of options out there for you. Just, pick the right branch. And I said, well, you were in the Army. Should I go in the Army? He's like, you know what? I know you and I know what kind of person you are. He goes, you should just take a look at the Air Force or the Coast Guard. So coincidentally, I drove about 2 hours down to a recruiter, and the Air Force line was a little long and the Coast Guard line was shorter. And I walked in and talked to the guy in the Coast Guard, and he laughed at me and goes, you know what? We don't take a lot of people, so it's going to be a long process. So then immediately I said, that's where I want to go. This guy's telling me I can't do it, so that's what I've got to do. So that's kind of how it all went down.
And that's what I admire most about you guys and the guys in your community, is that fire of when somebody kind of doubts you for whatever reason. That's where you put the pen to paper and you say, okay, this is what I want to do now. That's
Right.
something that 99% of people don't have, and they'll never have. That mentality that you have of, okay, you're telling me no, well, I'm going to turn that no into a yes. That's wild.
Right. Yeah, and as you talk to more people that are in our community, I'm sure you're going to see this. The stories are going to be very similar. They might be a little different of how they ended up getting into their units, but it all goes back to a lot of the similarities that we all share.
Yeah, even back to the home life, the discipline, the sense of craziness, being the first guy to jump off the boat, when you're with your friends, there was something that was always in you guys that led you the path that you went down.
Oh, absolutely. I was never afraid to get in trouble by any teacher at any of the schools I went to, and believe me, I did get in some trouble. I wasn't worried at all. I was more worried that phone call from the principal or the teacher going back to my family's house and me
Oh,
coming
God.
home and them knowing that I just did something. And like I said, I did some pretty silly stuff as a kid. We probably all did. But I was never, oh God, I've got detention or I'm gonna get suspended for 3 days. I didn't really care at all. But what I did care after that was happened, I'd go home. I was like, oh gosh, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble.
Oh, God. I could imagine. That's where the school's rule it no longer applies. You're now in Dad's office.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's too funny. So you go to do they in the Coast Guard? Do they refer to it as basic training?
Yeah, I went to Cape May, New Jersey was my boot camp. I was in, I think, Delta 144 was my graduating class.
Wow. Okay. So after you graduate, what's the next step? How did you know that you wanted to be the special operator?
Well, actually, at that point, I didn't really even know the Coast Guard had these units. So I kind of wanted to do search and rescue because I thought that was kind of the most high-speed stuff, and I really thought that was going to be good. And when you first get in the Coast Guard, before you get into your rating, they basically you put your dream sheet together, and then the recruiter says, okay, this is where you're going to go. The billet officer will say, okay, these are the top 3 places you picked. You did really good. You're top of your class. We're going to give you your top pick. And I ended up going to a ship out of Boston called the Spencer. It was 270 feet. And on that boat, we did search and rescue, alien migration interdiction operations. But I was just, I was brand new in the Coast Guard. So at this point, this is a great opportunity for someone in the Coast Guard because there's so many different jobs that are on these boats. There's helicopters attached to them. So you have the aviation units, you've got the engineers, you've got deck force. So then you can decide, oh, geez, this looks really good. Or, you know what, that's nothing what I want to do. So at that point, I realized I really like this search and rescue stuff. And from there, I went to a small boat station where I became a coxswain, and I got qualified to drive the 41 footers, the RHIs, which are rigid hull inflatable boat. I did that for about 3 years, and I got promoted a couple times. Did really good at it because I had a good crew with me, so that always helps too. And after about 3 years, I had a chief come up to me and said, "Hey, I got an opportunity for you. I'd like you to check this out." And I was like, "Oh, geez, what's the lead at?" I didn't even really know anything about it. And at this point, I'd been in the Coast Guard for probably probably 4 years or so. And I started learning about the leadet, and then they asked me if I wanted to come down to Florida and check it out, and I did, and never turned back.
That's wild. And what was that feeling like when you had the person come up to you and say, I got an opportunity for you? Because that had to be for a reason. He saw something into you where you could go to the next level.
Yeah, when it happens to you, I think you just think it happens to a lot more people. But then as we get older, or when you find out, you talk to other people and you tell them what you did, and they tell you that what they did, and they say, "Oh, I always wanted it again, but I couldn't, or I didn't have that opportunity." So then that's when you realize, you're like, "Geez, I really had a good opportunity, and I worked hard to get there, and I got recognized for it." So I appreciate that.
I could only imagine. That had to be an incredible feeling. So when you get down to Miami, you said, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
What was the training like when you got down there?
Well, I can't tell you all about all the training, but I can tell you all we did was train.
Oh god! And it's had to be tons of push-ups, pull-ups, running. What was that? The question I'm getting at is, how did you keep going? Because I'm sure that was just some of the toughest training that you would ever went through.
Yeah, it was really fun, and you always remember the good stuff when you're out, and you forget about the bad stuff. But like when I was in port trying to get qualified, we got to go through your PQS, personal qualification standards. I mean, every single day we would work out from 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock in the morning. That's like actually physically in a gym. And then we do actual training, whether it's on a range or obstacle course or actually classroom training. And then we'd work out again after lunch for 2 or 3 hours. So you're constantly just training and, just getting stronger and faster at everything you do.
Did they ever give you any time off, weekends or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. You have all the weekends off unless you're basically on duty, quote unquote, and basically that means you're on the ready team, and then you have to go in there and you keep working and training. But that's a little bit more lax.
Now I just got to ask one question that it often has popped up in my head during these times off. If you're down in Miami. Was there ever times where you guys were going out, partying, going out to bars, hanging out and stuff like that, or not at all?
Oh yeah, all the time. And you know what? We'd always tell people that we had a different job, and it was funny because it was like, what are we going to say we are tonight? And looking back at it, we probably looked so obvious, in incredible shape. Some of the guys, got quite a few tattoos, and and we're 4, 5, 6 guys out at a time, all kind of looking the same, clearly sticking together, and we're like, oh yeah, no, we work at Home Depot or whatever we were that night. So it was, looking back at it, it's probably quite obvious that people knew that we weren't who we said we were.
Yeah. They probably had a thought that you weren't the nighttime stock guy who just got the night off for the the couple hours off.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. So after the training was up in Miami, what was the next step? Was this when it all started to become very real, that you knew you were going to be going on deployments and stuff like that?
Yeah, so basically what happens is you train until you get qualified you have to take some, obviously some tests. And then once they determine you're, excuse me, capable to do the job, and you pass everything that you're supposed to pass, then you get put on a team. And then once you get put on a team, you've got to get qualified on that team. Like, for example, a boarding officer, a BO. Then if you've already been to BO school, you're qualified as a boarding officer, but not in the leadet. You still have to go through all the training again to make sure that you're up to the standard that they want you to be. So once you get put on a team, that's where it becomes fun. So I was attached to 401, even though I still deployed with 403, 404, 405, 407. One of my brothers that we laughed at all the time, Joven and I, we'd always say we were kind of the mercenaries, because anytime there was another deployment and they were looking for some teammates to fill in, we'd always have our first hands up and say, let's do it. They're like, oh, you guys just got back in country. I'm like, yeah, we're ready to go. So yeah, it's fun stuff.
That's incredible. So your hand was always up. You wanted action.
All the time. That was the only reason I was down there. I always joke and say I lived in Miami, but I was really never there.
What an honor, man. I'll tell you what. I got to say, just off tangent, it is so amazing to speak to guys like yourself because if more people only knew, that there were people who were ready to go out there like yourself who were putting their lives on the line, it's something that a lot of people don't process, and I can't get too much into it because I can go on forever, but it's just something that I wish people really realized.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Now, after, you know, when you had graduated fully, if you can answer, what were you guys doing? What was the main objective? I mean, I don't want to get too much in detail with missions because I know obviously it's, secretive, but if you can give me a little bit of background, what were you guys doing?
Most of our operations at the time when I was in was counter-narcotics, going after the big cartels, whether it's the Colombian cartels or Venezuela, going for the cocaine. At one time, my team had the fifth largest cocaine bust in the world.
Wow.
And if I remember correctly, it was about 9.5 tons of cocaine. So you can imagine the risk that goes in with trying to, and that's just not the lead-at guys. There's a lot of operators that are involved in this. We're working with the Navy. When you're in a lead-at, you're not on a Coast Guard boat. You're working with the U.S. Navy as a sortie, or the Dutch Navy, or the British Navy. And then what happens is you're using those vessels as a platform, and then you're either going into the country, or you're trying to stop these vessels from smuggling the drugs into the U.S.
Now, a perfect movie that I could relate this to would be, have you ever seen the movie Sicario?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great movie.
Is that kind of semi of a relation to the joint team guys who were working with you? Because I know in that, you knew there were some guys. Well, they asked in the movie, Delta Force, and obviously I'm not going to ask you to reveal, but was that the kind of stuff when it comes to joint team guys and guys from other, agencies who are working hand in hand to get rid of this cocaine?
Well, I always say that I never compare what we did to a movie because it's Hollywood. However,
Great point. Yeah, I agree with that.
But I will say that I had the opportunity to work with a lot of special forces guys, special operators from the Army, from the Navy, the Air Force, and civilian contractors, as well as GS guys. So they're definitely joint task force. When you're dealing with big drug operations like this, you're bringing in all the forces. And it was going on for years and years, and they're still doing it. There's like the units that are going down to South America that are, burning the coke labs. Eventually, you've got to get it. The coke gets out to the water, and then when it gets to the water, it tries to get back to land. So there's a whole process of guys doing a bunch of different operations, and then you've got civilian guys that are involved with it. So yeah, joint operations is a big thing within the Coast Guard and the rest of the military community for sure.
That's incredible. And the fact of, bringing in all the forces, forget America's superheroes. You guys are America's superheroes. You got the mean, machine team right there. That's wild.
That's nice of you to say.
And you guys are always humble too. I mean, and it's just so admirable. But I gotta ask this: 9 tons of cocaine, you said, right?
Yeah, 9.5.
9.5. That had to have been semi. I'm saying that had to have been well protected.
Oh, absolutely. They don't want to give up their drugs.
I know, and it's kind of I always get confused. Who would even want to do that in the beginning? But that's another podcast for another time. But
I just give you one fun little story. We had this we did this one drug bust. It was I think it was just three or four tons of cocaine. It was off the coast of Ecuador, and we did it with the Dutch Navy, if I remember correctly. That's the sortie we used. But then we offloaded the drugs to the U.S. Navy, and then we rode with the U.S. Navy through the Panama Canal to bring it. We were bringing it up to, I believe, Jacksonville, Florida, but somewhere on the Florida coast. And I remember that they had all their guys on deck, like protecting the boat. And I remember thinking, I was like, geez, we're in a pretty we could be in a pretty uncomfortable position. Here we are in the Panama Canal. Who knows? These guys, what will they do to get their drugs back if they want them? It's not like we're just in the middle of the ocean. So yeah, there's some times where you're like, oh geez, what did we just get ourselves into here?
And I would assume that these guys try their best. You say Ecuador try their best to hide these plants in the Amazon or in the jungle.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there's teams. I've got some teammates that I've worked with, very closely that would deploy into the jungle and actually try to track down the labs, going up and down the rivers in Colombia on RHIs, looking for people that would be on the side of the river, trying to find out how close the labs were to the river, and then you blow up the labs.
Wow, that's and how deep were these plants and the labs in the jungle? You had to have been trekking through the jungle, I'm assuming, for days.
Yeah, typically what it is for us, it's the end product, so it's not the plant. So we're not actually going after the plants. We're trying to stop the cocaine, the actual end product. For example, 1 kilo of coke it's pure cocaine. So that's like by the time it gets to the U.S. and starts getting delivered to all the people taking the drugs, that 1 kilo turns into 4 kilos of cocaine. So you can imagine what 9 tons of cocaine. You're multiplying that by four, and that's when the guy at the end of the end user is still having in his world pure cocaine. So the amount of dollars that these cartels spend to either properly hide it or manufacture it it's huge. It's huge.
Now, where does it all start with the when with you guys going there? Are you guys going in because the government? I know a lot of these countries mainly are third world, if not edging towards that. So is the government asking you guys to come in because they're afraid to send their own guys in due to these armies of cartels that are just masquerading people, known for horrific things?
Without getting into too much detail on that question, I would say most of the operations have a bilateral agreement with the country. However, you also have to imagine that some of these countries, bribery and coercion is often high. So sometimes the agreement that we have that we're going to go in and do something. There's certain people in the government that have approved it, but other people in the government don't know we're doing it, and that's on both sides. So the information's very confidential. So
Understandable. Now, when you were in the jungle, what was that like? The terrain that you were in, I'm sure, was filled with poisonous plants, snakes, everything. Was that something you were all briefed on before you went in? What to watch out for and what not to get too close to.
yeah, most of the guys that are actually going on land, that as opposed to the people like in the rivers or actually out on the boats, trying to do the seizures on the boats, everyone's properly trained, 100%. And, a little bit later we could talk about where I left after the lead at, but everything, no one's doing any job out there that they're not 100% trained on, whether it's a Navy guy or an Army guy, special operator that's working on another team, a joint task force unit, whether it's a civilian guy. Yeah, the training is pretty high to make sure that we do the job the best that we can do.
And the final question I have: when you were a leadette, was there any times that were really tough times where you kind of just said to yourself, this is really bad. I don't know if I'm going to make it out of here.
Well, I'd say there's a lot of times that we were doing stuff and we scratch our head when it was all over and go, I can't believe we made it out of there. I think that's more of the answer. I think when you're doing it, you're doing it and you're just trying to get it done. And no matter what it is, I mean, the end game is survival, right? But then at the end of the day, when you recoup and you recap what's going on, when you're doing your debriefs and you're like, wow, that was close.
And what's the blending like? I mean, do they advise you to blend in either, I don't know if you were just dropped in the jungle or if you were in the country, but is the end result always to try to, blend due to the possibility of these guys just walking around, patrolling the area, making sure that outsiders are not coming in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Even when you're in, for example, in Cartagena, which is a city in Colombia, a lot of times we'd be basing out of there, and I don't look like a Colombian, so you try to fit in. So are you a tourist? And how many tourists are really going to be in Cartagena, Colombia in the '90s? I don't know that many, and how many of them have short hair and are in good shape? And like I said, sometimes tattoos give things away, but we found ourselves trying to do the best that we could with at the times that we had, but at the same time, we did an operation in Colombia that I won't get into, but there was a bounty on my teams, on all of us, and they had it in the newspaper. So you can imagine this is a bad situation to find yourself in.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine. And did you ever see the newspaper?
Actually, I did not, and one of my buddies who was on my team, who's actually a police officer in Massachusetts now, he actually saw the newspaper, and I was like, man, I wish you got a copy of that because that'd be great to show, 10 years, 15 years later, like, look at this.
That's
they
wild.
spelled my name wrong.
That's what I was about to say. I could see the no fear of either, yeah, they spelled my name wrong, or they couldn't have gotten a better picture.
Yeah.
It's there's no fear, which is so, I mean, it's just badass purely. But after the lead at, what was next? Where did you go after that? What did you start doing?
Well, actually, I had no intention of leaving Elite, and doing a joint operation in South America, I ran into a couple of civilians that I actually didn't know were civilians, and they kind of opened my eyes to another opportunity. And then basically, I got recruited by a contract company. So I ended up, I think the term used to be called sheepdog. So basically, I left the Coast Guard and I worked for the State Department as a contractor for a company called DynCorp. And from my understanding, the way it happened real quick. I just basically went into my XO's office, said, "Hey, this is the opportunity I have," and he already knew everything, so they knew what was going on, probably way more than I thought they did, and processed my paperwork. On a Friday, got in my car on a Monday. I was up in New York to see my family. Within 15 to 20 days later, I was down in Virginia doing my next training, getting ready to go back overseas.
And where were you going now with DynCorp? Is that something where they just kind of send you wherever, they need you, or you have to be prepared? Do you have to be prepared to go anywhere in the world?
Yeah, I mean, typically you kind of go with what your MO is, what you're trained for. I honestly thought I was headed back to South America because that was kind of my stomping ground. I knew the area pretty well, and I had some really good contacts down there. But I was completely wrong. I ended up going to Southeastern Asia, which is on the other side of the world. And I think I mentioned this earlier to you offline. So my job description was to restore civil order in war-torn countries. So I went from being on a 6 to 9 man team to now being overseas with a couple guys, and then learning. There's a lot of us over there, but we're all working in different areas and different operations. So it was really fun. I really liked it.
And what were you doing there? I mean, if you can get into detail, if you can't, that's totally fine. But what were you doing in Southeastern Asia as far as, your job title when you were there with your team?
I did several things. The probably most notable thing was there was a election in, I think it was 2002, in a country called East Timor, and East Timor was at war forever. So we were there to try to make peace and basically make sure no one had any guns, go to the villages, and kind of make sure everyone who was trying to be good people, make sure they were safe. So I was actually in charge of an area called Hera and Metanera. So like for example, my name was Hera One. So kind of like put it in perspective, it'd be like kind of, for lack of a better word, almost like the chief of police in a small town, but you're in a village in the middle of nowhere, and there's no water, there's no electricity, so kind of just out there trying to survive, sort of.
And I remember you mentioning something to me about the survival. And because, I mean, I guess it all, might not be South America, but it all goes back to the surrounding of the jungle.
Yeah.
And that's just such a powerful word, the jungle. And those are jungles that are filled with poisonous everything. You know, I mean, from what I've seen on documentaries, was there ever any struggles where you had to apply your training? I mean, obviously, but you know, just to survive when it comes to nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, just basic stuff like water. I mean, things that we take for granted. The United Nations has a big role in East Timor. I was there through a couple of the United Nations terms, whether it was in support of East Timor, the transition of East Timor. But so the United Nations, for example, gives water bottles to people throughout the country. Well, water never makes it out to the middle of to the Bakura Mountains. The water's in the river, so and you don't just drink river water because everyone knows you'll get pretty sick. So just water alone, for example, we would boil the water. You walk forever to get it, and then you just put it in kind of like what we would see today in the U.S., like big gas containers, even though there's not gas, it's for water. And, you boil the water, and that's what you're drinking.
Wow. And that, that's just so wild. And I gotta ask, what did it taste like?
Tastes like river water.
just river water, I guess that wasn't going to give you the runs.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And it's funny because the locals will drink the water. And I read a report when I was over there that the United Nations had did, and it was the Bakura River, I believe. No, I'm sorry, it was the Metanera River. And they had human DNA in the river. And so they were saying, you should never drink this water because there's actually human DNA in the river because, from dead bodies being in the river up the river, and then the water goes down into the ocean. So if you're downstream, you're drinking the water that these dead bodies were in. But, so here we are, we're boiling this water to drink. But at the same time, locals are drinking with no problem. So one of these guys on my team, his code name was Diesel, which is kind of funny. But he looked like what you visualize as a guy named Diesel. And he used to say, "I'm going to start drinking the water a little bit at a time because then my body will get used to it." And I watched him kind of suffer a couple times. I was like, "So how's that working for you?"
Oh my gosh. It's funny. I remember I was in Mexico on vacation and I was horseback riding, and they had the same issue when it comes to water, soda, everything. And I remember drinking a Coke that had Mexican writing on it, Spanish. And as I was drinking it, I'm thinking, oh God, I hope that I do not get sick. And then I'm like, okay, it's Pepsi product or Coke product. And I'm hoping that everything's going to turn out well. I don't think anything could be wrong. And another guy who was on the same trip, who was from North Carolina or something, came over to me and said, "You know what? As I'm drinking it, I really hope we don't get sick." And because they've been reusing these bottles and they've been known to reuse bottles, and I just looked at him and I'm like, I really wish you told me that before I went and started.
So true, so true. And, it's funny too because I would go to Thailand or Indonesia because East Timor used to be owned by Indonesia. So I did some operations in a lot of the countries in South Eastern Asia, and I did some women trafficking, children trafficking stuff, which was not the norm for me. But I was over there, so they needed some joint help, for lack of a better word. But we would get to stay in hotels, and I'd get all excited. I'd be staying in this hotel. I could turn the light switch on and on. I had electricity, and I'd go over to the sink and I'd put my hand on the sink and start drinking the water. And then in small print above the sink, it says, "Do not drink this water. It's not to consume." And I'm like, "But I'm in a hotel. Why can't I drink the water?"
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine. And how did you control that? I think you controlled that a lot better than I would have, and the regular person would have. I think their thoughts alone would have gotten them sick instantly.
Yeah, it's never good. I'm trying to remember the saying, Montezuma's revenge or something. People used to say. Basically, you'd have either eat something bad or you drink something. Drink the water. You'd have ice in your drink if you're in the city, and next thing you know, you're stuck on a toilet for a while, that's never a good place to be.
No, not at all. Now, I do have a random question. I was doing a lot of research because you were in the Amazon on missions, right? I mean, if or were you or
My teams were. I was in the jungles in Colombia, but I mean, I wouldn't say that I was deep in the Amazon, with huge snakes and all over me, and that kind of thing. that answers your question.
Well, getting at that though, did you guys ever did the topic ever come up of, you know, lost tribe? Because I know that there's lost tribes in those jungles, and there you have never been inhabited. People have never come in contact with them, and they usually go to aggression immediately. Was that ever talk before you guys were going into situations in those areas? Because I know that South America is very big when it comes to like lost tribes and people just totally living off the land, how they've done for centuries.
Well, it's funny you say that because in Southeastern Asia, when I was in the Bakura Mountains, they still eat people. They still have cannibals.
Really?
Yeah. So you go into this village and they don't. It's not like they're advertising it, but some of the stuff you'd see would be absolutely like mind blowing. I was actually on patrol with a couple guys, and we were coming down from the Bakura Mountains, and we found this little hut, and we were looking to see if there was any guns that were like hidden in it or stored in it, and it was a bunch of human heads.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know how long those human heads were there, but I can tell you, there was a body attached to them at one point, and it's just a different culture when you're. It's not like you're in a war like in Iraq where you're fighting with guys in the street and everyone's got guns. I mean, some of these guys they have machetes. That's their weapon, or they've got bow and arrows. I mean, it's not even a fair, comparison to say that these guys are going to fight you in a battle because of the tools they have. And, we're going into these areas, any of these areas, the U.S. military, whether you're a special operator or you're contractor, you're trained more than everyone that's out there. I mean, it's a well-known fact, and that's why we operate like we do across the world.
And when you came across this hut filled with human heads, were they just laying around? I mean, to another movie. Yes, it was Hollywood, but I'm sure you've seen Apocalypse Now. When they show up and it's just there's human heads all over the place. And were they just laying around, or were they stacked up? Or I mean, I could only imagine what was going through your head when you saw that. That had to have been shocking.
Yeah, actually, I did see Apocalypse Now. I think it's a great movie, but no, it wasn't like that. This was like more of I don't know if you're a hunter, but if you go hunting in like the Adirondacks or something, there's a little camp, and next to the camp there's like a little outhouse where you go to the bathroom because there's no running water. Like
Sure.
it'd be like that would be like the size of a little hut, and with human parts in it, you start to wonder what's going on here. And and they believe in black magic as opposed to voodoo because there's two different ones. So one village is fighting the other village because maybe like a baby died, and they think a village chief actually put a curse on the village because this newborn just died, when really the newborn probably just died because the newborn died. So then these basically villages are fighting. So a lot of times we were there, excuse me, I was there, and I was trying to make peace between two villages because they really aren't. I mean, it sounds kind of ironic, but they're not dangerous people, even though they're dangerous to themselves and everyone around them. But they're not dangerous in like, oh, they're going to come in, they're going to come into the city like Dili, the capital, and start killing everyone. That's not really what the concern was.
Yeah, and I know that they tend, to fear the regular armies in those communities. I know that I did do research on a tribe that during the Vietnam War, the North Vietnamese and the United States soldiers, everyone who was there were lost tribes that were in those jungles that they were fearful to go into because of the belief of spirits and the voodoo that they could cast on the person who was the non-believer.
Yeah, absolutely. I went into this one village and I got a helicopter ride. Hilo dropped us in there. There was 4 of us, and as soon as I met with the chief, he was completely upset. He was freaking out. My interpreter was talking to me, telling me that he thought the helicopter was like the devil because they didn't understand. They never saw that before. So all of a sudden, these people like myself get out of this this devil machine, and I'm trying to make peace with these guys, and they're already thinking that we're very bad people when really wasn't the case.
And what was did you ever have, like in this situation that you were in, did they think you guys were, gods or somebody who was magic, not having seen the helicopter, you guys have all this tactical stuff on. You're coming with components they'd never seen before. What do you think was going through their heads? I mean, as far as that goes.
They're very confused, very confused. I wouldn't say that they think that we're a different creature or a god, but they're definitely confused on just the equipment, just our look, everything about us, and we're bigger, we're eating more than them, we're stronger, so our size, there's a size difference just as one human to another. So even when you start talking about the black magic, I made it very clear to a couple chiefs that that doesn't work on me because I'm more powerful than their black magic. Regardless if they are really trying to put spells on me. Listen, it didn't work. I'm still alive today. But I can tell you it probably confused them because, while I was there, nothing happened to me.
Wow. And was there ever any fear, that you guys were possibly going to bring germs in? I mean, you were going there to do your job, which was a good job. They being confused. But I know that's a big thing as well. Outside germs, stuff that they never been exposed to. Was that ever a concern as well, or no?
I don't think so. That doesn't ring a bell at all. But I can tell you for us, like I don't know if you're familiar with what dengue fever is.
I've heard of it. Yes.
That comes from mosquito. I actually got dengue fever and malaria at the same time, and
Oh God.
I was taking, if I remember correctly, it's called Larium, and I got brought to a Thai hospital, and they asked me what I was taking. I told them Larium, and they asked me how long I was taking it for, and you have to take it once a week, and I was taking it like every Wednesday, let's say, and I remember I had been taking it for 2 years, so basically that's 104 weeks, 52 weeks in a year, and the doctor goes, "This is a drug you're supposed to just take like for 2 to 4 weeks."
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, geez, I've been taking this for 2 years, and I still got malaria, and I got dengue fever. What's dengue fever? And then the doctor tells me, well, if you catch it a second time, your brain can hemorrhage and you can die. I'm like, geez, from a mosquito?
Oh my gosh.
This is a bad situation.
Yeah, something that you don't even know if it's landing. It's might. If it's gonna land on you. You have no idea what the hell it is.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I
Wow.
think the more of the concern was not us bringing in germs to any villages or even the where the hospitals were, or and I say hospitals, I use that word very loosely, but to me it was more of us, what are we going to catch here? And before I went over there, when I was in Virginia, I just finished Crucible training, which is a contract company that does a lot of the training. I just finished going to the Crucible, and I remember I had to get all these shots, and one of them was Japanese encephalitis, and it was like a 3-phase shot, and I'm like, geez, I feel like if I'm going to a place and I've got to get all these shots, this isn't really a good place to be going. But that's where they needed us to go, right?
That's wild. And I guess the tribes people are, whoever was living there should have been more concerned about casting the spells, not on you guys in the helicopter, if they were, but on those mosquitoes that were giving dengue fever.
Yeah.
Keeping them safe as well. But that's very intense. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Now, after that, what was the next step? What have you been up to recently?
Well, I'm a business owner. I left Southeastern Asia. I was my total time in the military and contracting was about 11 years, I think. And I came back to the U.S. and then I started into business with my current business partner. His name's Marty Fuller, and coincidentally, he is a Coast Guard alumni. He went to the Coast Guard Academy back in the 70s, but he actually, when he got out of the Coast Guard Academy, I don't remember what the opportunity was, but he ended up not actually going into the Coast Guard. He ended up just leaving after the academy. And so I became good friends with him. He's a great mentor. And right now we have 7 factories in the U.S. We're 100% American manufacturing. We make a bunch of stuff like chimney liners, stainless steel pipe for vending systems, tubular skylights, solar attic fans, traditional skylights, and yeah, it's really good stuff. I love it. Got about 200 employees or so. and it's great.
Wow, that's incredible. That's amazing. And I gotta ask, have you done any traveling still? Recently, or are you still doing all the adventures?
Yeah, I love to travel. I think that's in my blood. I mean, a couple of years ago, I went over and played hockey over in Lithuania and Latvia. Did a quick trip with a team out of Boston. Played in Iceland, and then played in Sweden. So yeah, I love to travel. I love Costa Rica. I love South America and Central America. I haven't been back to Colombia since I worked there back in the day, but I'd like to make a trip back there. I've never been back to East Timor. Probably will never go there again. But I'll probably, my wife wants to go to Bali, Indonesia, so I'll probably bring her there and then swing into Thailand and see some of my buddies that are over there.
Wow. And I just gotta say, first off, Darin, it's been an honor having you on Patriots Corner and listening to your story. And thank you for sharing your story. That's just something that, like I said from the beginning, 99% of people don't realize what you guys are really, going through. 100, I can almost say like 100% of people are never going to see a head in a shack. It's crazy, but I mean, it's just so amazing. And I just have to ask you, not to get political, but what's your opinion on the stuff recently going down, when it comes to the desecration of the American flag? The people who are trying to argue former and active military members, it's just, yeah, all opinions are always going to be there to be heard, but some stuff is just so outlandish, it's horrific.
Blows my mind. It blows my mind. I mean, especially the American flag. I mean, got a flagpole in my front yard, flies every day, and I can tell you, if someone tries to come take that down, it's going to be a serious problem. Um, it's not even an option in my world. And as far as like these people protesting, the far left, they don't like the right. The problem is the media, in my opinion, pushes these sides further and further apart, and then it puts it for an agenda, and it just shouldn't happen. I've got friends that are Democrats, and when the elections were going on, we still had dinner, we still had glasses of wine and drank beers, and no one was arguing in my house. But then you turn on the news, and these guys are screaming like tear down this statue, or Black Lives Matter, or these guys are Nazis. And there's a lot of bad people doing dumb stuff out there that they should be handled appropriately on both sides. And and it's a disgrace, especially when people travel and go to these other countries, and that's the view that they're having of America. And I can tell you, all the time that I served in the military and as a contractor, to just see these guys that whether they're protesting on some college campus or in front of the White House, they need to do something more productive with their time.
And I
That's my
could
that's my opinion.
No, and that's fantastic too. And thank you for sharing that answer. That I completely agree with you because I just graduated, and you'll see students who are getting their college tuition paid by their families, and they always say the little giggle, haha, America's really not that great, and you kind of just wonder, where are you getting this thought from? Like, I mean, it's spawning from somebody else other than the people, one, who are protecting it outside of the country, people who are protecting it inside the country, and just the soul of respecting the current leader. And that's the thing that I really don't understand is I feel like, yes, opinions are always good because you'd never want something that would be you never want someone to be a dictator. But I feel like if you give somebody too much space, they tend to just formulate these crazy thoughts in their heads that really make absolutely no sense. Going back to the protest that we were, just you were just giving your answer upon. That's my opinion on that. I mean, as far as allowing somebody the opportunity to share their thoughts, sure, you can, but you just got to ask, where are you getting the facts from? You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. 100%. And, I always look at it and say, it, some people that are protesting that have never seen outside of their small little town or wherever they live, why don't you go overseas for a minute and see how some of these other countries are? And you'll see that you just can't just go and protest because you'll get killed. Like, that's what happens. Go try to set a protest up in China or in Thailand or Malaysia or any of these countries. Good luck. Good
Yeah,
luck.
exactly. Because I did have who gave that. I did have a former SEAL, and I won't mention his name, who was podcasting, and he said that exact response as the women, and he specified women due to the lack of respect that a lot of other countries show to women, which is a shame. But the women who are protesting, you go over there, there's going to be a lot of mistreatment, and they don't realize, and even men, who are protesting heinously, that what you think you're fighting for, the people over in those other countries, they're not really going to give much of a shit. I mean, it's going to go a lot souther, I feel like, than what they think that it would go like.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And it's unfortunate because I think if people really understood what was going on in other countries or around the world, they would realize, excuse me, sorry about that. They would realize that the United States is the best country in the world. Bottom line, I've been to many, many countries. I've deployed to many countries. When I was in Alita, I deployed about 300 days out of the year. And I can tell you, when you get back on American soil, there's just that feeling of, you know what, I'm safe. I'm home.
And that's a fantastic answer, and that's why I admire you guys as well. And it was an incredible podcast interview. And Darin, thank you so much for agreeing to do it, and thank you for being on Patriots Corner. This meant a lot, and it went fantastically. And thank you for your service, sir. I really, it was an honor.
Matt, thank you so much for what you're doing out there, brother. Appreciate it. And I hope you get some more guys out there and we can spread the word and let's change some of the attitudes of some of the people out there. And thank you very much.
Darin, God bless you. Thanks for your service, and thank you for being on Patriots Corner. Have a great night.